بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه أما بعد. My dear brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our last lesson of Nuzhatu Nazar fi tawdihi Nukhbatul-Fikr. In our last lesson, we were discussing 4 topics. Number 1, who are the da'if and the thiqah narrators? Number 2, those narrators who have unique names. Number 3, those narrators who have unique laqab, they have unique titles. And number 4, nasab and attribution. In today's lesson, we are insha'Allah going to be discussing 8 topics. Number 1, the client of the narrators. Number 2, the brothers and sisters of the narrators. Number 3, the etiquettes of the Shaikh and the student. Number 4, the age limit for listening to a hadith and the age limit for delivering a hadith. Number 5, the method of writing and recording hadith. Number 6, the method of traveling for hadith. Number 7, the different types of compilation for hadith. And number 8, the reasons for narrating a hadith. These are the 8 topics we will insha'Allah be discussing in today's lesson. Coming to the first topic of today's lesson, and that is the clients of the narrators. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. يقول أبو الفضل أحمد بن علي بن محمد بن علي بن أحمد المعروف بابن حجر العسقلاني رحمة الله عليه: ومعرفة الموالي من أعلى أو أسفل بالرق وبالحلف أو بالإسلام، لأن كل ذلك يطلق عليه مولى ولا يعرف تمييز ذلك إلا بالتنصيص عليه. In this section, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he is explaining to us that it is important for you to know about the clients of the narrators. And a person may become client for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, he becomes a client through freeing a slave. So the master, he has freed the slave, so now this slave, he becomes the client of his master. The second way of how one may become a client is through alliance and protection. If this person says, I will help my master, I will protect my master, this person, he now becomes the client of his master. And the third way of how one may become a client is through the acceptance of Islam. If this person, he has accepted Islam on the other person's hand, he now becomes the client of this person. So these are 3 different ways of how one may become a client of another person. Number 1, it is through freeing a slave. Number 2, through alliance and protection. And number 3, it is through the acceptance of Islam. For example, Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh, he was known as Al-Ju'fi. His full name was Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari, and he was known as Al-Ju'fi. And this is because Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh's grandfather, he accepted Islam on the hands of Yaman ibn Akhnas al-Ju'fi. So because Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh's grandfather, he accepted Islam on the hands of Yaman ibn Akhnas al-Ju'fi, he became the client of Yaman ibn Akhnas al-Ju'fi, and this is why Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh, he was known as al-Ju'fi. So Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, a person may become a client for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, it is through freeing a slave. Number 2, through alliance and protection. And number 3, through the acceptance of Islam. Coming to the second topic of today's lesson, and that is the brothers and sisters of the narrators. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: ومعرفة الإخوة والأخوات وقد صنف فيه القدماء كعلي بن المديني. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah is telling us, it is important for you to know about the brothers and sisters of the narrators. For example, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, his brother was called Fadl ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, his brother was called Zayd ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha wa aradaha, the beloved wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, her sister was called Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anha. Both of these two, they were sisters. Another example is Zainab bint Jahash radiyallahu anha and Hamna bint Jahash radiyallahu anha. Both of these two, they were sisters. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, it is important for you to know about the brothers and sisters of the narrators. Coming to the third topic of today's lesson, and that is the etiquettes of the Shaykh and the student. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: ومن المهم أيضا معرفة آداب الشيخ والطالب، ويشتركان في تصحيح النية والتطهر من أعراض الدنيا وتحسين الخلق. وينفرد الشيخ بأن يسمع إذا احتيج إليه، ولا يحدث ببلد فيه أولى منه، بل يرشد إليه، ولا يترك إسماع أحد لنية فاسدة، وأن يتطهر ويجلس بوقار، ولا يحدث قائما ولا عجلا ولا في الطريق إلا إن اضطر إلى ذلك، وأن يمسك عن التحديث إذا خشي التغير أو النسيان لمرض أو هرم، وإذا اتخذ مجلس الإملاء أن يكون له مستمل يقظ. وينفرد الطالب بأن يوقر الشيخ ولا يضجره، ويرشد غيره لما سمعه، ولا يدع الاستفادة لحياء أو تكبر، ويكتب ما سمعه تاما، ويعتني بالتقييد والضبط، ويذاكر بمحفوظه ليرسخ في ذهنه. In this section, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he is explaining to us the importance of the etiquettes of the Shaykh as well as of the student. And etiquettes and adab is one of the most important areas when you are studying ilm, when you are studying knowledge. Even in the Quran, when Allah speaks to the great prophets like Musa alayhi salam, Allah teaches him adab, Allah teaches him respect before giving him wahi and revelation. Allah says, فَخْلَعْنَ عَلَيْكَ إِنَّكَ بِالْوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوَى. Remove your shoes, you are in the blessed valley of Tuwa. وَأَنَا اخْتَرْتُكَ, and I have chosen you. فَاسْتَمِعْ لِمَا يُوحَى. Now listen to what is being revealed upon you. إِنَّنِي أَنَا اللَّهُ, indeed I am Allah. لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدْنِي وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِلذِّكْرِ. Before giving wahi and revelation to Musa alayhi salam, Allah commands and Allah teaches Musa alayhi salam to remove his shoes, teaching him adab and teaching him respect. So if Musa alayhi salam and the great prophets of Allah, if Allah Azza wa Jal, He is teaching them adab, and if they require adab, then how much do you think you and I, we require adab and we require these etiquettes? And this is why the scholars of the past, they would always teach the students adab and respect and manners before teaching them Quran, Hadith, Tafsir and Fiqh. Imam Rabi'atul Rai, one of the greatest faqih and one of the greatest muhaddith of Medina, Imam Rabi'atul Rai, he was also the teacher of Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh. Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh, on his first day when he was going to study under Imam Rabi'atul Rai, Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh's mother, she said to Imam Malik that, "Oh my son, before you go and take the ilm of hadith and tafsir and fiqh from Imam Rabi'atul Rai, go and take the ilm of akhlaq and adab and manners from him." So Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh, he goes and he sits in the gathering of Imam Rabi'atul Rai. Imam Rabi'atul Rai, when he saw Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh sitting in his gathering, The first advice Imam Rabi'atul Rai he gave to Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh was, he said to him, Ya bunayya, O my son, akhlis lillah, have ikhlas for Allah, have sincerity for Allah, make your intention clean and pure for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. The first guidance and the first etiquette that Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh he was taught and he was told by Imam Rabi'atul Rai, it was on adab, it was on akhlaq, it was on etiquettes and manners. So the ulamas and the scholars, they give so much importance to akhlaq and manners and etiquettes. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, in this section he has categorized adab into three categories. Number one, adab that is related to the Shaikh and the student. Number two, adab that is related to the teacher for his student. And number three, adab that is related to the student for his teacher. Coming to the first one, and that is adab that is related to both the Shaykh as well as the student. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, it is important for both the Shaykh as well as the student to correct their intention, meaning your intention for seeking knowledge and the intention for teaching hadith should only be for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Your intention must be clean and pure. And this is because seeking knowledge is an act of worship. And an act of worship can only be done for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. If a person, he seeks knowledge, or if someone teaches knowledge, and his intention is for any worldly purpose, then this is known as shirk in the niyyah. It is known as associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal in the intention, in your niyyah. And such an act of worship, Allah Azza wa Jal, He will not accept it. And this is because Allah Azza wa Jal, He is pure and He only loves that which is pure. Allah says, فَعْبُدِ اللَّهِ مُخْلِصًا لَهُ الدِّينِ. Worship Allah, making your deen pure for Allah Azza wa Jal. So if someone teaches ilm, or if someone seeks knowledge, and he has any other intention other than for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, then such an act of worship will not be accepted. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he warned us against seeking knowledge for a worldly purpose. قال عليه الصلاة والسلام من تعلم علما مما يبتغى به وجه الله لا يتعلمه إلا ليصيب به عرضا من الدنيا لم يجد عرف الجنة. Whosoever seeks knowledge and his intention is not to please Allah Azza wa Jal, his intention is for a worldly purpose, then such a person on the day of judgment, he will not smell the fragrance of Jannah. And this is why, my dear brothers and my sisters, when you are seeking knowledge, make your intention pure for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Seek knowledge to please Allah. Seek knowledge because you want to know what is the correct way of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is because we cannot worship Allah Azza wa Jal from our own mind, from our own thinking, how we think we should worship Allah, or how you think we should worship Allah. Our worship to Allah Azza wa Jal must be based on Quran and the authentic ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ upon the understanding of the pious predecessors. So this is why when you learn ilm, make your intention pure and clean. I am seeking knowledge because I want to know the correct way of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. I am seeking knowledge to please Allah Azza wa Jal. It must not be for any worldly purpose, for fame. It must not be because your children are telling you to seek knowledge, or your parents are telling you to seek knowledge. It must not be because you want to gain a certificate at the end of your studies. All of these are worldly purpose. Your intention must be clean and pure. It should only be to please Allah Azza wa Jal. The second point over here is etiquettes that are related to the Shaykh for his student. And Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he has mentioned 8 points over here that are related to the teacher for his student. The first point is, when someone comes to you for ilm, when someone comes to you for knowledge, don't hide ilm from him, don't hide knowledge from him. And this is because kitman ilm, hiding knowledge, is one of the greatest major sins, and Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in the Quran, إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون. As for those who conceal our signs after we have made it clear for the people in the book, upon them is the curse of Allah and the curse of those who are entitled to curse. So if someone comes to you for ilm, if someone comes to you for knowledge, and you know that this knowledge is correct, make sure that you deliver this ilm to him and don't hide ilm from anyone. The second etiquette for the Shaykh is that if a student of knowledge, he comes to you and he seeks knowledge, then if in that city where the student is residing, there are other scholars as well, then make sure that you refer the student to other scholars so he can benefit from these other scholars in his local area. But with a condition, and the condition is that these scholars that you are referring the student to, make sure that you only refer to those scholars whose aqidah is good, whose methodology is upon the Quran and the Hadith, based upon the understanding of the pious predecessors. And this is because if you refer the student to someone whose aqidah is not good, whose methodology is corrupted, whose methodology is wrong, and if this student, he gets misguided, then you have been the cause of his misguidance. Therefore, when you refer the student to other scholars in his local area, make sure that you refer him to those scholars who are upon the correct methodology. And this is why Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi said, أخذت عن ألف شيخ ما منهم إلا وهو يقول الإيمان قول وعمل يزيد وينقص. I have taken ilm from more than 1,000 shuyukh, and every one of them they said that Iman, it includes speech and action. Iman increases and Iman decreases. In other words, Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi is saying that those scholars whom I took my ilm from, all of them, they had sound aqidah and their methodology was correct. So therefore, when you refer the student to those scholars, make sure that you refer to those scholars who are upon the correct methodology. And this is because this deen is an amanat, and you can only take this deen from someone who is reliable and someone trustworthy. قال محمد بن سيرين رحمه الله إن هذا الدين أمانة فانظروا عمن تأخذوا دينكم. This deen is an amanat. Be very careful from whom you take your deen from. You can only take this deen from someone who is truthful, someone reliable, and someone trustworthy. The third etiquette is that if you have found out and if you notice that this student's intention is wrong, his intention is to seek knowledge for a worldly purpose, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says, don't stop teaching him ilm. Continue teaching him. Maybe a week later, maybe after a month, he may come back to the straight path. He may have the correct intention. So just because you have noticed that this student, he has wrong intention, don't stop teaching him. Give him a chance. Give him an opportunity. Maybe he will come back after a week or after a month. In the meantime, continue making dua for your student. Continue giving him nasiha and giving him advice. And insha'Allah, he will come back to the right path and he will correct his intention, insha'Allah, very shortly. The fourth point over here is that when you teach hadith in a state of ablution, in a state of wudu. When you are sitting to teach hadith, make sure that you are teaching hadith in a state of ablution. And this is because part of the etiquettes of teaching hadith is that you should be in a state of purity, in a state of cleanliness. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayhi says, when you are teaching hadith, teach hadith in a state of wudu. And being in a state of wudu is a sign of iman. قال عليه الصلاة والسلام لا يحافظ على الوضوء إلا مؤمن. That the one who safeguards his wudu is a believer. Therefore, one of the sign for your iman, one of the sign as a believer is that you are constantly staying in a state of wudu. And this is why when the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard the footsteps of Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Jannah, he asked Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, what is the good deed that you do that I heard your footsteps in Jannah? Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, every time I perform wudu, I pray 2 rakat salah. This is why, my dear brothers and my sisters, as a student of knowledge, try to stay in a state of ablution, in a state of wudu. Because this is a sign of iman, it is a sign of belief. The 5th etiquette here is that sit with adab and sit with respect when you are delivering hadith. Don't lean back and deliver hadith. When you are delivering hadith to others, sit with adab, sit with respect, sit with manners, and then deliver hadith. The 6th etiquette over here is that when you are delivering hadith, don't deliver it whilst you are standing or whilst you are walking. And this is because if you deliver hadith whilst you are walking or whilst you are standing, then you may end up getting distracted. And this could lead to making minor mistakes or even major mistakes when you are delivering hadith. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, don't deliver hadith whilst you are standing or whilst you are walking, unless you are compelled to do so. The 7th etiquette over here is that when you start to forget a hadith, that's the time when you should stop delivering hadith. For example, if you start to forget a hadith due to old age, due to weakness in the memory, or because you have lost your books, or because of an illness, or because of an accident, so Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, the time when you should stop delivering hadith is when you start to forget a hadith. That's the time when you should stop delivering a hadith. The 8th etiquette over here is that appoint a student who will dictate a hadith from you, someone who is fully awake, someone who is fully responsible. And this is because in those days there were no microphones like how we have today. In those days there were no microphones. So what used to happen is the teacher, he would deliver the hadith, and far distance place there would be another student, he would narrate the hadith to those students who were sitting behind him. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says that this student that you have appointed to deliver the hadith to those who are sitting behind him, make sure that this student, he is fully responsible, he is fully awake, and he is not making minor or major mistakes when he is delivering the hadith to those students who are sitting behind him. These are the 8 etiquettes Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi has mentioned that are related to the teacher for his student. The 3rd point over here is etiquettes that are related to the student for his teacher. And Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi, he has mentioned 6 etiquettes that are related to the student for his teacher. The first one is that respect your teacher and don't harm him in any way. Respect your teacher and don't harm your teacher in any way. However, when you respect your teacher, make sure that you respect him within the boundaries of the Sharia. So yes, we are told to respect our teachers, but it must be within the boundaries of the Sharia. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا وَلَمْ يُؤَقِّرْ كَبِيرَنَا. He is not from amongst us, the one who does not show mercy to his young ones, and he does not respect his elders. So yes, we are told to respect our elders, but it must not go beyond the boundaries of the Sharia. We must not commit excesses when we are respecting our elders. Allah says in the Quran, Ya Ahl al-Kitab, La taghlu fi dinikum. Do not commit excesses in your religion. So even when we are respecting our teachers, we are respecting our elders, it must be within the boundaries of the Sharia. For example, if your teacher tells you to do something which goes against the Sharia, can we do it? And the answer is no. And this is because the Prophet ﷺ said, لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. There is no obedience to any creation when the Creator, Allah Azza wa Jal, is being disobeyed. Similarly, even when we stand for our teachers, even when we stand up for our elders, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi says that this standing up for our teachers, this qiyam is not for ta'zeem. It is not to honor our teachers. It is not to honor our elders. This qiyam and this standing up is for musawat. It is for evenness. Otherwise, this standing up and this qiyam for ta'zeem, this qiyam for honoring, it is only allowed for Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is because this qiyam for ta'zeem, it is an act of worship, and an act of worship, it is only allowed for Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah says, وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Stand only for Allah Azza wa Jal. And today we find some people, they stand before their Shaykh, they stand before their Hazrat as if they are standing in Salah. And this is not allowed. This standing up for ta'zeem is only allowed for Allah Azza wa Jal, because this qiyam for ta'zeem, it is an act of worship, as Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, he has clarified this issue. Similarly, Ibn Abi Dhi'b, he was one of the greatest scholars of his time. Once he was praying salah in the masjid, and one of the prince, the leader, he entered the masjid. When he entered the masjid, all the people who were praying in the masjid at that time, they quickly finished their prayers and they stood up to honor their prince. They stood up to honor their leader. Ibn Abi Dhi'b, he continued praying in salah. After he finished his salah, he stood up and he made salam to the prince. So the prince said that, why didn't you stand up in order to honor me like all of these people have stood up? Ibn Abi Dhi'b, he said, إِنَّمَا يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That people should only stand for the Lord of the worlds. So all the security guard at that time, they quickly arrested Ibn Abi Dhi'b because he spoke in this manner before the prince and before the leader. The prince and the leader said, اتركوه, leave him, فوالله لقد وقفت كل شعرة في جسدي من كلامه. By Allah, every hair in my body has been affected because of his speech. The point is that when we respect our elders, we must not respect our elders which will go beyond the boundaries of the Sharia. Our respect for elders, it must be within the boundaries of the Sharia. The second etiquette of the student for his teacher is that whatever you hear from your Shaykh, whatever you learn from your Shaykh, make sure that you deliver this ilm to others. Because one of the principles of learning ilm is, after you have learned this ilm, make sure that you spread this ilm to others. Pass this message on to everyone else around you. Pass it on to your brothers and sisters, to your family members, to your children, to your husbands, to your wives. Pass this message on to everyone so they can too benefit from this ilm. And this is why Shaykh Abdul Ghaffar al-Hassan, he said, إذا لم يتعرض الإنسان بعد طلبه للعلم 4 سنين في مذاكرته وحفظه ونشره وإسماعه سينسى كل شيء وهذا جربناه. If a student of knowledge, if for 4 years after studying ilm, he doesn't engage himself in revising this ilm, in spreading this message to others, in memorizing this ilm, then within 4 years he will forget everything. And this is what we are telling you from our experience. So whatever you learn from this lesson, and whatever you learn from your shaykh, from your teachers, make sure that you deliver this message to everyone else around you. The third etiquette of the student is that never allow arrogance and pride to come between you and ilm. Never allow arrogance to come between you and knowledge. And this is because the day you think and the day you believe that you are better than someone else because you have this ilm, because you have this knowledge, and the moment you allow pride and arrogance coming between you and ilm, that's the day when the door of ignorance will open for you. Never allow arrogance to come between you and ilm. And this is because ilm, it doesn't create arrogance and pride within your heart. Ilm, it creates humbleness. It creates the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal in your heart. It doesn't create arrogance and pride. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal, in the Quran, He has praised the ulamas. Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Ulama are those people who have khashiyah for Allah Azza wa Jal. They have fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. So ilm, it creates fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. It creates khawf min Allah. It creates khashya min Allah. It creates the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal in your heart. It doesn't create pride and arrogance in your heart. Therefore, never allow arrogance to come between you and ilm. Always humble yourself for ilm. The more you get ilm, the more you need to humble yourself. فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام من تواضع لله رفعه الله. Whosoever humbles himself, Allah Azza wa Jal, He will raise him. So ilm, it doesn't create pride and arrogance, it creates tawadu', it creates khashiyah, it creates khawf min Allah, it creates fear of Allah Azza wa Jal in your heart. The more you have ilm, the more you should humble yourself. The fourth point over here is that always write ilm from your shaykh. Whenever the shaykh teaches you ilm, make sure that you write this ilm down. And this is because when you don't write ilm, you will end up losing ilm. And when you write ilm, this is one of the ways to protect your ilm. This is one of the ways to protect your knowledge. And when you don't write, then you will end up losing ilm. And losing ilm is truly a calamity. A calamity is not when you lose a couple of pounds, when you lose dollars. True calamity is not when you lose your health, when you lose your wealth. True calamity is when you lose ilm, when you lose knowledge. And this is because ilm is wahi and revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. This is because ilm is mirathun nubuwah. It is the inheritance of the prophets. The Prophet ﷺ said that the Anbiya and the Prophets, they don't leave wealth behind them. They don't leave dinar and dirham behind them. They leave ilm behind them. So when you lose ilm, you are losing wahi and revelation. When you lose ilm, you are losing part of the mirathun nubuwah, the inheritance of the Prophets. Therefore, make sure that you write ilm from your shaykh. Whenever the shaykh teaches you, make sure that you write this ilm down. The fifth etiquette over here is that when you write ilm and when you write this knowledge down, make sure that you put the vowel signs. Especially in the Arabic language, there are vowel signs. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, make sure that you put the vowel signs on the words. And this is because sometimes an Arabic word may be pronounced in two different ways. For example, the word abi, alif, ba and ya. Now this word can be pronounced as abi in one context. In another context, it may be pronounced as ubay. But the way you write it is the same. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, make sure that you put the vowel marks so you know that in this context the pronunciation is abi, and in the other context, the pronunciation is ubay. The sixth etiquette over here is that constantly revise what you have learnt. Whatever you have learnt, make sure that you revise it. And this is because when you don't revise, then eventually you will forget your ilm. And this is why Imam Bukhari, rahmatullahi alayh, rahimahullah ta'ala, rahmatan wasi'ah, when he was asked, Bima nilta ilmak, how did you gain all this knowledge? How did you gain all this ilm? He said, Bitaqwallahi wa bittakrar, through God consciousness, righteousness and piety, and through constantly revising what I have learnt. And this is why, my dear brothers and my sisters, this is why we have recorded these videos. For who? For you. So you can benefit from these videos, you can go back to these videos, and you can constantly revise what you have learnt. So these are the 6 etiquettes Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahmatullahi alayh, he has mentioned over here with regards to the students. There are other etiquettes as well, which Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahmatullahi alayh, he has not mentioned. Amongst these etiquettes are, number 1, be punctual in your obligatory duties. If there are certain obligatory duties that Allah Azza wa Jal, He has laid down upon you, make sure that you fulfill these obligatory duties. For example, if your parents, they are in need of you, especially if they are in need of you, then don't just spend your time in seeking knowledge. Fulfill your obligatory duties, serve your parents, but a portion of it, seek knowledge. So make sure that you are fulfilling your obligatory duties as a student of knowledge. The second etiquette is avoid bad company. Look for a friend, search for a friend who will take you close to Allah Azza wa Jal. Look for a friend who will help you in seeking knowledge. If you have a friend and this friend of yours is taking you even 1% away from Allah Azza wa Jal, then that's the time when you should stop your friendship with that person. Look for a friend who will take you close to Allah Azza wa Jal. Look for a friend who will help you in seeking ilm, in seeking knowledge. The third etiquette over here is that be punctual in your lessons. Don't be late for your classes. And this is because when you are late for your classes, you will eventually end up losing ilm. And losing ilm is like losing wahi and revelation. Losing ilm is like losing mirathun nubuwah, the inheritance of the prophets. Therefore, be punctual in your classes and don't be late for your lessons. The fourth point over here is that when you are listening to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, sit with adab, sit with respect, sit with all the etiquettes. Don't lean and listen to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Sit how the Prophet ﷺ used to sit. In the hadith of Hadith Muslim, Hadith Jibreel, the Sahabi describes how the Prophet ﷺ, he was sitting before Jibreel ﷺ. The hadith says, فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْهِ وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ وَقَالَ يَا مُحَمَّدْ أَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ. The Prophet ﷺ, he sat in such a manner that his knees were touching the knees of Jibreel ﷺ. Sit how the Prophet ﷺ used to sit. Sit how the Sahabas, they used to sit before the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahabas, they describe that the Sahabas, they used to sit as though they were birds sitting on their head. This was the adab, this was the respect the Sahabas had for listening to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The fifth etiquette over here is that when you are listening to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, don't fiddle with anything. Don't fiddle with your mobile phones, with your iPads. Avoid all kind of distractions. Sit with adab, sit with respect, and listen to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. These videos that you are listening to, you may be listening to these videos from the comfort of your home. Yet, listen to these videos. When you are listening to them, sit with adab and sit with respect. Not because I am teaching, but as a respect for the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. As a respect for wahi, as a respect for revelation and a respect for ilm and knowledge. These are the 5 etiquettes that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he has not mentioned, but they are related to the student. Coming to the 4th topic of today's lesson, and that is, what is the age limit for listening to a hadith and the age limit for delivering the hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: ومن المهم معرفة سن التحمل والأداء، والأصح اعتبار سن التحمل بالتمييز هذا في السماع. وقد جرت عادة المحدثين بإحضارهم الأطفال مجالس الحديث ويكتبون لهم أنهم حضروا، ولا بد في مثل ذلك من إجازة المسمع. والأصح في سن الطلب بنفسه أن يتأهل لذلك. ويصح تحمل الكافر أيضا إذا أداه بعد إسلامه، وكذا الفاسق من باب الأولى إذا أداه بعد توبته وثبوت عدالته. وأما الأداء فقد تقدم أنه لا اختصاص له بزمن معين، بل يقيد بالاحتياج والتأهل لذلك، وهو مختلف باختلاف الأشخاص. وقال ابن خلاد: إذا بلغ 50 ولا ينكر عند 40، وتعقب بمن حدث قبلها كمالك. In this section, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he's explaining to us 3 points. Number 1, what is the age limit for listening to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salam? Number 2, what is the ruling if a disbeliever narrates the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? And number 3, what is the age limit for delivering the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? These are the 3 topics we will inshallah be discussing in this section. The first one is, what is the age limit for listening to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? The majority of the scholars, they say that there is no age limit for listening to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. There are some scholars, they have put an age limit of 30 years old, meaning you cannot listen to the hadith unless you are a minimum age of 30 years. There are some scholars like Musa ibn Harun al-Hammal. He said, يكتب سماع للصبي إذا كان يميز بين البقرة والحمار. When a child, he is able to differentiate between a cow and a donkey, then that's the age when a child is allowed to listen to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So there are some scholars, they have put an age limit, but the majority of the scholars, they say that there is no age limit for listening to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is why there were many scholars of the past, they used to bring their children along with them and sitting in the dars, listening to the hadith from the scholars, from the mashayikh, rahimahumullah ta'ala alayhim ajma'in. They would take them to the halaqah, to the circles of ilm, and their children would benefit from those ahadith that they would hear from the mashayikh and the scholars. So the correct opinion is that there is no age limit for a child to listen to the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. The second topic over here is, what is the ruling if a disbeliever narrates a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? Are we going to accept this hadith or not? Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says that we are going to look into the status when this narrator, he delivered the hadith. If he delivered the hadith as a disbeliever, then in this case his hadith will not be accepted. And this is because when we were discussing the conditions of an authentic hadith, we said one of the conditions is that he must be adil and he must be righteous. So if this narrator, he is a disbeliever, then but natural, he does not fulfill this condition. However, if at the time of delivery of the hadith, he was a Muslim, then because at the time of delivery he was a Muslim, then as long as other conditions are fulfilled for an authentic hadith, this hadith will be accepted. In short, when a narrator delivers a hadith, we are going to look into his status at the time of delivery and not when he heard the hadith. For example, Jubair ibn Mut'im radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he heard a hadith from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when he was a disbeliever. However, at the time of delivery, when he was narrating the hadith, he was a Sahabi and he was in a state of Islam. He was a Muslim. He was a Sahabi of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Are we going to accept the hadith or not? Yes, the hadith will be accepted. Why? Because we will look into his state at the time of delivery. At the time of delivery, Jubair ibn Mut'im radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he was a Sahabi, he was a Muslim, and therefore his hadith will be accepted, although he heard the hadith when he was a disbeliever, but we will look into his status at the time of delivery. At the time of delivery, he was a Muslim, he was a Sahabi, and therefore the hadith will be accepted. Similarly, if there is a narrator, and this narrator, he was accused of committing major sins, but later on he came back to the straight path and he repented and his righteousness is proven, then Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says, if at the time of delivery he has repented from all the major sins that he was committing, then his hadith will be accepted and we will take into account the state that he was in at the time of delivery of the hadith. Coming to the third point over here, and that is, what is the age limit for delivering a hadith? And is there an age limit for delivering a hadith? The scholars, they say that if the need arises and you have the knowledge to deliver the hadith and you have the correct knowledge, then you are allowed to deliver the hadith and you are allowed to deliver ilm to the students and to the public. There are some scholars, they said that there is an age limit for delivering a hadith. And amongst these scholars are Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Khallad al-Rama Hurmuzi. Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Khallad al-Rama Hurmuzi. He said that the age limit for delivering a hadith is 50 years. Meaning, you cannot deliver a hadith unless you have reached the age of 50. However, he says, if someone teaches hadith at the age of 40, then he should not be criticized. This is the view of Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Khallad al-Rama Hurmuzi. The point is, there are some scholars, they have put an age limit for delivering the hadith. However, the majority of the scholars, they say that there is no age limit for delivering a hadith. As long as the need arises in your local community, in your area, and you have knowledge to deliver the hadith and you have the correct knowledge, then you are allowed to deliver the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The opinion of Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Khallad al-Rama Hurmuzi of that fact that you can only teach hadith at the age of 50, this opinion, it doesn't only go against the views of the majority of the scholars, it also goes against the practice of the majority of the scholars. For example, Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayh, Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayh, and many of the great muhaddithin, they never waited till they were 50 years of age to deliver the hadith. They started teaching hadith at a very young age. So the view of Hassan ibn Abdul Rahman ibn Khallad al-Rama Hurmuzi, it goes against the majority of the scholars. Therefore, the correct view is that there is no age limit for delivering the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Coming to the fifth topic of today's lesson, and that is, what is the method of writing and recording the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: ومن المهم معرفة صفة كتابة الحديث، وهو أن يكتبه مبينا مفسرا ويشكل المشكل منه وينقطه ويكتب الساقط في الحاشية اليمنى ما دام في السطر بقية وإلا ففي اليسرى، وصفة عرضه وهو مقابلته مع الشيخ المسمع أو مع ثقة غيره أو مع نفسه شيئا فشيئا، وصفة سماعه بأن لا يتشاغل بما يخل به من نسخ أو حديث أو نعاس، وصفة إسماعه كذلك، وأن يكون ذلك من أصله الذي سمع فيه أو من فرع قوبل على أصله فإن تعذر فليجبره بالإجازة لما خالف إن خالف. In this section, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he is explaining to us 4 points. Number 1, the method of writing hadith and the method of recording the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Number 2, the method of verifying the hadith. Number 3, the method of listening to the hadith. And number 4, the method of delivering the hadith. These are the 4 points Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh he is mentioning in this section of the method of writing and recording hadith. The first point over here is, what is the method of writing and recording hadith? Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he has mentioned 4 points over here. The first point is, when you are writing the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, or you are writing any ilm, when you are writing any knowledge, make sure that you write it very clearly. Make sure that you write it in such a manner that later on, if you were to read your writing, you are able to understand what you have wrote. Today we find sometimes the students of knowledge, they write, but later on, when a week later or a month later, if you were to ask them to read their own writing, they cannot read their own writing. So if they themselves cannot read their own writing, how can you expect someone else to read this writing? So Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says, when you are writing ilm, make sure that you write it clearly. The second point over here is that make sure that you put the vowel marks on the letters. And this is because sometimes in the Arabic language, a word may be written in one way, but the way you pronounce it is in 2 different ways. For example, the word abi. The word abi has alif, ba, and ya. Now in one context, abi might be correct, but in another context, it may be ubay. So depending upon the context, the pronunciation may change. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says, make sure that you write the vowel marks on the letters so you know how to pronounce these letters. The third point over here is, he says, make sure that you put the dots on the letters. And this is because there are some letters in the Arabic language which have dots on. For example, the letter Sin and the letter Sheen. The letter Sheen has 3 dots. And the letter Sin is without dots. So if you were to write Sheen without dots, then someone else may read this as Sin, because Sin does not have any dots. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says, make sure that you add the dots on the letters so that when you are reading this later on, you are able to pronounce these words correctly. The fourth point over here, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi mentions is, if you missed something whilst you were writing, then add this additional piece of information on the right hand margin if there is space. If there is no space on the right hand margin, then you can add this additional information on the left hand margin. These are the 4 points Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh he has mentioned with regards to writing and recording the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The second point over here is verifying the hadith, verifying what you have written. When you write this ilm and when you write the ahadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says that go and get this information checked with your teacher to make sure that this information and this knowledge is free from major and minor mistakes. So when you get your ilm checked, you can have some confidence that alhamdulillah there are no major and minor mistakes in this information. And the scholars of the past, they had a habit of verifying the information that they have written from their teacher, from the Shaikh. So the second point over here is, when you write any information, get it checked by your teacher, get it checked by your Shaikh to make sure that this information is free from major and minor mistakes. The third point over here is, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi mentions, is the method of listening to the hadith. And the method of listening to the hadith is when you are sitting and when you are listening to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, sit with adab, sit with respect, sit with etiquettes, and don't fiddle with things which will distract you. Don't fiddle with your mobile phones, with your iPad. Avoid all kind of distractions when you are listening to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The fourth point over here is the method of the delivery of the hadith. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayhi says, when you are delivering the hadith to your student, make sure that you deliver the hadith in such a manner that the way you heard the hadith from your Shaykh, in the same manner you are delivering the hadith to your student, without making any major and minor mistakes, without increasing and decreasing in the words or in the letters of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The way you heard ilm, that's the same way you should be delivering the hadith to other students. And this is because ilm and knowledge is to be taken from the hearts of the ulamas. It should be taken from the hearts of the scholars, from the chest of the scholars. Ilm is not in the books. Yes, you will find some goodness in the books, but true ilm is to be taken from the hearts of the scholars. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمَ انْتِزَاعًا مِّن صُدُورِ الْعُلَمَاءِ وَلَكِنْ يَقْبِضُهُ بِقَبْضِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Allah Azza wa Jal, He does not lift up ilm, He does not lift up knowledge through snatching it from the hearts of the scholars, but Allah Azza wa Jal, He lifts up ilm through the death of the scholars. This shows and this indicates that true ilm is in the hearts of the ulamas. This is why the way you heard the hadith from your Shaykh, that's the way you should deliver the hadith to your students. Coming to the sixth topic of today's lesson, and that is the method of traveling for hadith. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: وصفة الرحلة فيه حيث يبتدئ بحديث أهل بلده فيستوعبه ثم يرحل فيحصل في الرحلة ما ليس عنده ويكون اعتناؤه بتكثير المسموع أولى من اعتنائه بتكثير الشيوخ. In this section, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he is telling us what is the method of traveling for hadith. When you are traveling for hadith, what are the principles and the guidelines the ulama and the scholars have laid down? Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayhi says that firstly, try and study from your local scholars. Once you have studied from your local scholars and you have taken as much as hadith as possibly as you can from the local scholars, now travel to other places, to other muhaddithin and to other scholars of hadith. However, when you do travel to other scholars of hadith, your desire should not be to increase the number of teachers, your desire should be to increase the number of ahadith. Take from them those ahadith which you were not able to hear from your local scholars. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayhi says, your desire should be to increase the number of ahadith and your desire should not be to increase the number of teachers. Coming to the seventh topic of today's lesson, and that is the different types of compilations of hadith. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: وصفة تصنيفه وذلك إما على المسانيد بأن يجمع مسند كل صحابي على حدة، فإن شاء رتبه على سوابقهم وإن شاء رتبه على حروف المعجم وهو أسهل تناولا، أو تصنيفه على الأبواب الفقهية أو غيرها بأن يجمع في كل باب ما ورد فيه مما يدل على حكمه إثباتا أو نفيا، والأولى أن يقصر على ما صح أو حسن، فإن جمع الجميع فليبين علة الضعيف، أو تصنيفه على العلل فيذكر المتن وطرقه وبيان اختلاف نقلته، والأحسن أن يرتبها على الأبواب ليسهل تناولها، أو يجمعه على الأطراف فيذكر طرف الحديث الدال على بقيته ويجمع أسانيده إما مستوعبا وإما متقيدا بكتب مخصوصة. In this section, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he is explaining to us the four different types of compiling a hadith. There are 4 ways to compile the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The first one is masanid, number 2 abwab, number 3 al-ilal, and number 4 atraf. These are the 4 ways a person may compile the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The first one is masanid. Masanid is the plural for musnad. And musnad is when a person, he compiles the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in one of 2 ways. Either he compiles the hadith based on those narrators who accepted Islam first, then those narrators who accepted Islam second and third, and so on. So it is based on the narrator's acceptance of Islam. This is the first way of compiling musnad. The second way of compiling musnad is according to alphabetical order. So those narrators whose name begins with alif, you will list them first. Those narrators whose name begins with ba, you will list them second. So you are listing these narrators and you are listing the ahadith based on the narrator's alphabetical order. So these are 2 ways how you can compile musnad. Either, number 1, it is based on the narrator's acceptance of Islam, and number 2, it is according to alphabetical order. The second way of compiling ahadith is al-abwab. An abwab is the plural for bab, which means a chapter. And in abwab, the way you compile the hadith is, you pick up a particular subject. Suppose you pick up fiqh, and you bring and you title each chapter. Suppose you chapter Kitab-ut-Tahara, the book of purity. So you bring all the hadith related to purity under that chapter. Then you chapter Kitab-us-Salah, the book of Salah and prayers, and you bring all the ahadith related to Salah under that chapter. Then you title Kitab-uz-Zakat, the book of Zakat, the book of charity, and you bring all the ahadith related to charity under that section. This is known as abwab. But Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayhi says, when you are compiling ahadith in this manner, through abwab, then make sure that you only bring those ahadith which are accepted. You only bring the maqbul ahadith. And those ahadith which are accepted are Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih li ghayrihi, Hasan li dhatihi, and Hasan li ghayrihi. These are the 4 types of ahadith which are accepted. But if you want to bring the weak ahadith, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullah alayhi says that you can bring the weak ahadith, but make sure that you label these weak ahadith so that people know, the reader knows that these are the ahadith which are weak. So if you want to bring the weak ahadith, you may bring them, but make sure that you label these weak ahadith. The third way of compiling hadith is known as al-ilal. And al-ilal means that you compile the hadith in such a manner that you bring the matan of the hadith, you bring the text of the hadith, and after you bring the matan, now you bring all the various chains for this hadith. You bring the kathratu turuq, the various other chains related to this matan, and you collect all of them in this book. And you separate the connected chains from the disconnected chains. So al-ilal means that you bring the matan of the hadith, and then you bring the various chains, the kathratu turuq for this hadith, but you bring it in such a manner that you differentiate and you separate the disconnected chains from the connected chains. This is known as al-ilal. The fourth way of compiling hadith is known as atraf. An atraf means that you bring the matan of the hadith. You bring one part of a hadith, the text of the hadith, and you bring it in such a manner that one is able to identify the remainder of the hadith if he was to read this one part of a hadith. So you bring the matan, you bring the text of a hadith in such a manner that if one was to look at this matan, he is able to identify the remainder of the hadith. This is known as atraf. So these are the 4 ways of compiling the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The first one is masanid, number 2 abwab, number 3 al-ilal, and number 4 atraf. There are other ways as well of compiling ahadith which Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he has not mentioned over here. For example, there is mu'jam, there is jami', mustakhraj, mustadrak, there is juz. So there are many other ways of compiling ahadith, but these are the 4 ways Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he has mentioned over here. Coming to the last topic of today's lesson, and that is the reason for narrating a hadith. يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: ومن المهم معرفة سبب الحديث، وقد صنف فيه بعض شيوخ القاضي أبي يعلى بن الفراء الحنبلي وهو أبو حفص العكبري. قد ذكر الشيخ تقي الدين ابن دقيق العيد أن بعض أهل عصره شرع في جمع ذلك، وكأنه ما رأى تصنيف العكبري المذكور، وصنفوا في غالب هذه الأنواع على ما أشرنا إليه غالبا، وهي أي هذه الأنواع المذكورة في هذه الخاتمة نقل محض، ظاهرة التعريف مستغنية عن التمثيل، وحصرها متعسر، فلتراجع لها مبسوطاتها ليحصل الوقوف على حقائقها. In this section, Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullahi alayh, he is mentioning the last point from the most important points. He says, it is important for you to know why a hadith was narrated from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is because sometimes a hadith was narrated due to a particular event. For example, there are many verses in the Quran which were revealed due to a particular event. A particular event occurred, and as a result of that event, a verse of the Quran was revealed. Similarly, there are many ahadith why the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned these ahadith. So these ahadith were mentioned due to a particular event. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullah, he says, it is important for you to know about these events. Why did the Prophet ﷺ narrated this hadith, and why did he mention this hadith? And there are some scholars, they have wrote books on why the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned this particular hadith. Amongst his scholars is Abu Hafs al-Ukbari. Abu Hafs al-Ukbari, he has authored a book on this topic, and he has mentioned many ahadith on why the Prophet ﷺ narrated this hadith and what was the event behind narrating these ahadith. These are the points that we have finished discussing. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullah, he is telling us that all the points that we have been discussing so far for the past few lessons, like it is important for you to know the tabaqa of the narrators, the reliable and the weak narrators, the method of writing hadith, the method of recording hadith, the method of listening to the hadith, and all the points that we have discussed so far. Hafidh ibn Hajar rahmatullah, he says, our intention here is only to briefly mention these points. Otherwise, the scholars have written books on each and every single point that we have discussed so far since our last few lessons. Our purpose over here was only to mention these points briefly. As we conclude this lesson and as we conclude this course, يقول المصنف رحمه الله تعالى: والله الموفق والهادي لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب. As we conclude this book of Hafidh ibn Hajar's Nuzhatu في توضيح Nukhbatul-Fikr, one may ask, what is the next book I can study after I finish this book? And one can study many books. For example, he can study Muqaddama ibn Salah, he can study the books of Khatib al-Baghdadi's. You can also study Hakim al-Naysaburi's Ma'rifatu Ulum al-Hadith. You can also study Al-Fiyatul Iraqi of Hafidh Zainuddin al-Iraqi. So there are many other books that one can study and excel in this field. As we conclude this course, I really pray to Allah Azza wa Jal, whatever you have learned in this course from the beginning to the end, may Allah Azza wa Jal, He make this course a means of success for you and for me. May Allah make this course for your success in this life as well as in the next life. May Allah Azza wa Jal make this course a means to increase in your ilm, to increase in your knowledge, a knowledge which is a beneficial knowledge in this life as well as in the next life. And whatever I have said, if it is true, it is from Allah Azza wa Jal. And if it is falsehood, then the falsehood is attributed to me and the shaitan. إن كان صوابا فمن الله وإن كان خطأ فمن نفسي والشيطان. As we conclude the course, I hope to see you in other courses of Al-Amana Institute. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ونعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع ومن عين لا تدمع ومن دعاء لا يسمع اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم أعنا ولا تعن علينا وانصرنا ولا تنصر علينا وامكر لنا ولا تمكر علينا واهدنا ويسر الهدى لنا وانصرنا على من بغى علينا اللهم تقبل توبتنا واغسل حوبتنا وأجب دعوتنا وثبت حجتنا واهدي قلوبنا وسدد ألسنتنا واسلل سخيمة صدورنا اللهم طهر قلوبنا من النفاق وأعمالنا من الرياء وألسنتنا من الكذب وأعيننا من الخيانة إنك تعلم خائنة الأعين وما تخفي الصدور ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين اللهم إنا نسألك الجنة وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.